This video will show you what a vendor item is on an inventory item. So on an inventory item, you typically have your default cost for that item, and you've also assigned a default vendor that you typically purchase that part from. But maybe there are other vendors that you can buy that part from, and you want to keep track of what those other vendors charge you for that item. And you would do that on the Vendor Items tab, or the Vendor tab. So if you click this new button on the Vendor tab, it allows you to add these vendor items. So Kenmore Supplies was the vendor that I have as the default, so it has their name in there by default when I add a new vendor item. So let's add one for them first. So Kenmore Supplies, I typically order that for $888. If they have a specific vendor part number, I can put that in here. Let's add another vendor item for another vendor. So let's click the new button again, and I'm going to choose Hannah. And I purchased that part for $910. So I'm filling out the item cost and the PO item cost. And I'm going to put in a vendor number for them. And I'll click the new button one more time and add one more vendor. So let's do Chamberlain, and I'm going to put in a different vendor part number, and I purchased that part for $950 from them. So let's click OK to add that third vendor item. So you can use these vendor items when you're placing a purchase order, or also on a service order, you can choose what vendor item you want to use. So let's first go up to a service order, and I'm going to create a new one. And we'll add that item to this work order. So to add that material item to the work order, go to the Order Items tab, hit Material, and I'm going to find that item from my list and double click on it. In the window that opens, you can go to the Item Details tab. It's going to show you the vendor that you typically order that part from, but you can change the vendor item to a different vendor. So if I want to order this part from a different vendor, I can choose this one, and it changes it to Hannah, and notice the cost goes to $910. Or this one, if I change it to that one, the vendor will change and the cost changes. That one's $950. So let's leave it at this vendor. So now if I have to go place a purchase order for this item because I don't have anything in stock, it's going to order it from that vendor at that vendor price. So I'm going to click the Actions button, and let's create a PO for selected items. You can see it's that item, and the vendor's Chamberlain, and the vendor item number, and the cost is $950. I'm going to go ahead and add this to a PO. This is just your regular PO process. I'll just check Include, and when I hit Save All Changes, it will go ahead and create a purchase order. Let's go look at the purchase order. So if we go to the Purchase Order tab on that service order, it will list out all POs associated with that service order, and you would just double click on it to jump to that PO. So now we're looking at that purchase order. We purchased this part from Chamberlain, and on the PO Items tab, you can tell it was $950. Now, if you want to use a vendor item directly on the purchase order, you can do that as well. So let's create a new PO directly in the purchase order, and we know we want to purchase from Hannah. If we go to the PO Items tab, you can add items to the PO, so you would just use the New button. So typically you're probably using the I button to just choose from your inventory item list, but I actually want to pull from my vendor items since I set that up for Hannah. So if you click the V button, that allows you to pull from vendor items set up for that particular vendor. And I just have 3 vendor items listed for that vendor, and the one we've been working with is this KX item. So let's double click on that one. And notice that when we added that item to the order, the cost is defaulting to that vendor item's cost, which is $910. The inventory item's default cost is $888, but since we pulled from the vendor item, it's adding that vendor item cost instead of the default item cost.